we have, let me ask a little bit about the nature of our assistance. When we're talking about $750 million, I guess, to Ukraine and $193 million to democracy building. When we talk about democracy building, is what we're talking about money that we give to NGOs? Is that included in this?
Our assistance varies. Some of it is to NGOs to help build their capacity. Most of our assistance goes through U.S. contractors and U.S. NGOs that provide technical assistance from civil society,
the answer is yes.
Judicial reform, a whole host of areas, not just civil society.
In that host of reforms, do we sponsor NGOs that are pushing specific environmental policies as well?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Environmental policies. Do we have NGOs who are suggesting that the countries and pushing to organize people within these countries to focus on particular energy sources or environmental mandates and restrictions?
We do not that I'm aware of. What we do is to work with countries to help them meet EU directives related to energy, environment, and private sector in their energy sector. So EU directives, but not anything beyond that.
Okay. Well, let me note that we just recently, with a delegation, visited Kosovo, and there is apparently an American-sponsored NGO that is becoming very aggressive in trying to promote certain energy sources. And I have met in that area, region as well, people are talking about NGOs trying to push for what we would call here renewable energy resources rather than energy sources that perhaps are cheaper for those societies at this particular stage in their development. And I think that while we all who would disagree with some very positive thing called environmentalism, what's good for the environment, there are distinct debates as to what is, in the long run, the best direction to go in terms of renewables right now and the developing world. Because if you have expenditures for energy that are higher now in a developing world, that means they don't have other money available for education, health care, et cetera, et cetera. And so if maybe perhaps you could get back to me with a list of the NGOs that are engaged with trying to influence energy policy under your jurisdictions. That would be very helpful.
Yes, sir. We will look into that.
And Ms. Romanowski, you wanted to say something about that?
Well, I did want to add a point that with respect to Kosovo in particular, we are supporting broadly their energy development and their energy security plans, which do include a combination of renewables. We are also looking at how they could be building a third and more modern coal plant, as well as replace the outdated and very, very highly polluting Kosovo A plant. So there are the energy situation in Kosovo is particularly serious and very, very unreliable, and we are working with Kosovo to develop an energy plan that clearly is both short-term and a medium-term objective, including all types of energy sources.
I will have to admit that it certainly is, we need to be involved with helping hands for countries like Kosovo and other countries, but I think people would resent it here if we had people who were being paid by foreign governments to come in and tell us what energy policies are best for our country. And, you know, so Kosovo, this is not an illiterate, uneducated group of people. They should be able to make decisions on their own, And it seems to me providing that type of pressure, and I know that people have, how do you say, they have the best of motives in mind in all of these areas because this is what they believe is good. Sometimes, of course, people can disagree with what exactly that policy should be, but even with that, the idea of having the United States government going in, pressuring countries where you have populations that are relatively educated populations toward these type of policies, I think it's something we need to think about and be a little bit more retrospective in terms of how we would feel. We had people in here from the United Nations who now are going to come in and tell us what we're going to do in terms of our energy and environmental policies. What about social issues? Are we financing NGOs on different social issues?
Are you specifically referring to Kosovo or more broadly?
No, generally in Eastern Europe and in Eurasia.
If you include healthcare as a social issue, yes. We support NGOs who engage in issues related to healthcare.
Well, the complaints that we have heard is that that we are defining social issues to include sexual type of things and basically policy towards homosexuality, which we in the United States, we don't believe in people being discriminated against for this, but in those countries, perhaps they are culturally different than we are, and having pressuring them through our government to accept certain cultural norms like that. I think that in Hungary in particular, we heard some people complaining that their government was being pressured by American taxpayer groups that were trying to force them to change their policy on this, which again should be left up to individual countries to make their determination as to what their position would be on gay marriage, for example, or even abortion. Any comments on that?
Mr. Rohrbacher, our support for civil society and for NGOs is very much focused on themes that strengthen democratic governance, that help support the reform agendas that the people in this region are interested in pursuing. They are also focused on having laws and values that don't discriminate against the peoples in this region and other minorities that are in this region. So a lot of our work that we do with NGOs and, in fact, in our engagement, diplomatic engagement with the governments in the region is to ensure that the laws are free of discrimination and in this region. So a lot of the work that we do with NGOs does encompass many of the values that we share in this country.
So the answer is yes, and let me just note that I think that trying to push our belief from Western civilization belief that, for example, most of us don't believe that we should have multiple wives, or you're married to one person, and to go to an Islamic country and try to push norms, whether it's homosexuality or whether it's men-women relationships and things like that. I think that we would find it very difficult if somebody was coming into the United States with government money trying to pressure us in the opposite directions, because that's what their culture says is the right way to go. With limited resources and with the fact that we are borrowing every single penny that we give to these countries, it might be better for us to prioritize, and that telling them how to run the social structure in their country should receive a lot lower priority than perhaps working with them to build their economy and build a more interactive country with us in terms of economics and other items like that. With that said, I will be very happy to yield to Mr. Deutsch. What time?